Welcome to the Dr. Shawn Tierney Podcast. My name is Shawn Tierney, and I am a neuromusculoskeletal sonologist. I treat athletes and high performers. My goal with this podcast is to help you make better decisions regarding your health, athleticism, and all aspects of life. Here, I'm both a student and a teacher. Thank you for tuning in. Hi, this is Dr. Shawn Tierney with the Dr. Shawn Tierney Podcast. Here today with a very important person for me, my mom, Laura Faith Bock, also known as Laura Faith Ramage Tierney Bock, to clarify her history. And she is definitely the most influential woman in my development as a person, and one of the most influential women in my life today. So I'm so honored that she's here with me, talking to me, having this podcast. Now, Mom, I just want you to go over, hey, how did you develop this? You know, as a kid coming up, you know, things were different for you. And then you talked a little later, you had some stories of where your family came from, where you came from, you know, what developed the first 10 years of your life? What do you remember?
So much. My father and mother were from Cambridge, Lore City and Kipling, Ohio. They settled in Level Green near Monroeville, Pennsylvania, southeast of Pittsburgh. That's where they raised me in the woods. And they were way I got my name. You want that?
Sure, yeah.
We lived in the woods, and they had planned to name me Sylvia or Hope or maybe Charity. But when my mother saw me between her legs, she said, "That's Laura Faith." And that's whom I have been ever since, through all the different stages of my life, till now at 82.
Yeah.
Had 3 sisters, lots of aunts and uncles and cousins, and everything was really super fine. I grew up very aware in the woods, just aware of the world around me and feeling the presence of God, I guess, although I don't know that I understood it then. As I grew up, became more aware, and people influenced my life, and many people in different areas and ways. I ended up becoming going to school to be a physical therapist after the guidance counselor advised me, and then went on to graduate school. And when I finished my internship, I went to California in the Air Force. And want to hear about my first patient?
Sure.
My first patient was amazing. He was kind of a miracle. I was 24. He would have been 21. He was shot through the spine and didn't know if he would be able to breathe on his own again. And it came where he did. I was ranging him during that time. He got where he could breathe, and then he got where he could move his arms. He got where he could move his right leg, but not the left. Eventually, he got faint movement in the left hip, but not anything enough to move the leg. At any rate, we worked trying to get him to do floor mat exercises, and worked how to get him up into the wheelchair and down again. And then I thought that he should be able to stand. He had a long leg brace on the one leg. It did not go up to the hip because he could stand and brace his weight against the Y ligament in the front of the hip. So we got him in the parallel bars, and he was able to stand. So we shifted his weight around standing there several days. I had him twice a day. And then I said to him, "You want to try to walk?" I said, "I don't know if you can or not, but if we don't try, we'll never know." So he tried walking in the parallel bars, and he was able to. So after he had gotten pretty good at that, I said, "Do you want to try to walk outside the bars?" Which was very scary. And he said, "Yes." I said, "Again, if we don't try, we'll never know." He was able to walk outside the parallel bars with a walker and that long leg brace. Long story short, we eventually went and were able to train him to go up and down stairs. When he had no real hip action, he could throw the leg up and use the Y ligament. Anyway, he could go up and down stairs. And it was like he was like a miracle to me. But one of the strongest things that I thought was, if you don't try, you'll never know. Be ready in case you can't. But if you can, how wonderful. So that was my first with that experience. I had several other patients. One was a little 18-month-old girl whose father had her in a van parked on a hill. They lived on a steep hill. And when he was getting her out of the van started rolling backwards. He threw her clear and it got his legs. But she hit her skull on the pavement. And they removed the whole frontal lobe, most of the right side of the brain. So they called me in to see if I would take her as a patient and warned me that she might be a flat affect with no frontal lobe. At any rate, I accepted her and worked with other therapists, OT and speech in the home. And she got where she could talk, and she got her arms back and her one leg, but not the other one. So I worked with her. She loved my silver pen, and I let her play with it on the couch while I made her stand on her bad leg, weak leg, and shifted her around. Got to where she could not only stand, but she could walk, but she fell a lot. And I thought at first that she was falling because she was looking back to see if I was watching. And I thought there's a balance problem. So I got her outside on a baby swing. And when I went to swing her, she went, when you swing. So I sang to her. I sang her name and I pushed her forward and back and singing her name. And she loved that. And I took her side to side, round and round. Oh, I forgot also to tell you that she loved, when I walked in, she lit up like a Christmas tree. And she's not supposed to have much personality. She did. And she was smart. She could talk. She knew her numbers. She was a bright little girl, even though she had lost most of her brain. Not most, but a great deal. I got her going up and down the hill in her yard. I would say, "I think there's a bunny up there under the bush. Want to go see if there's a bunny?" We'd go up the hill. "Maybe that bunny's down by the bush by your house," and back down, up and down and up and down in the heat. At any rate, she got to, she could walk well, and I got her going on a tricycle. And I lost her when she was when she was 3.5, when they started her in preschool. And then when when she was in second grade, I happened to see a little boy that was in her class. His mother was helping spot me with a head injury patient that was 6'2". At any rate, forgetting what I was saying.
So you saw them when she was in second grade, right?
Yeah, and I said, "Andrea's in your class," and he said, "Yes." I said, how is she? He said, she's smart, but she has a temper.
Oh, yeah.
Both of her parents had had tempers, and so she had picked that up, even though she didn't have any right frontal lobe. Now, before that also, I had her at one point on a bench swing. I held her close, and then I eventually got where I laid her down on my legs. And she got real quiet, and I thought, oh my, I don't know what happens when you're upside down and your brain doesn't have a space, And anyway, I said, Andrea, and she said, what? She was fine. Here again, I think no matter what, the good Lord gave us bodies that can heal, amazingly heal. And this little girl came back to be a normal little girl. So it just was a wonderful experience. I have had so many of those kind of experiences in my life that it's hard to imagine how the Lord was that good to me. At any rate, they called me the miracle worker, but it wasn't me. The thing is, reach. If you don't know if you can do something, try it. If you can, and warn them ahead, and you do, try it. And if you can't, it's amazing what they can do. When they first got me to go into home care at all, because I thought, oh my, just one patient at a time, was used to being in the clinic. And so they said this other therapist said there was nothing more to do with the patient. And so would I please go in, because the restorative nurse thought there was still more potential. I went in, and she had had a stroke. Her left arm was totally flaccid. The left leg worked, and we were working to get it to work better. The husband had been trained to range her arm, and he always did. But we were working with the walking, and he would take her shopping with him. And he said she can walk with pushing the cart, but when she got tired, he was stuck. And I said, well, have her push the wheelchair, and then you can get it around, so she can sit down when she gets tired. And the nurse said, how can she push a wheelchair when she can't use her left hand? I said, you hold it on for her. And she did. And one day I got a call from the nurse, and she said, Laura Faith, Bessie held on when I let go of her hand. We found that we got helping hand work out of that arm and hand because we reached. And so she, like I say, she got helping hand use. I don't know if you want any more of my stories or not.
Oh, it's so good to have so many stories. I think we need more. I think we go back a little bit, like, what was it like working with Grandpa, growing up in Level Green?
Oh, we lived in the woods, and there were 4 girls, but I was the one that was more interested, and I was my dad's helper. I handed him the tools, whatever he needed. I worked right with him all along. So we were a good team, and I learned a lot. I also, when I was little, he had made a swing from a high branch in the tree, and my aunt was pushing me on the swing, and I kept saying, higher, higher. And all of a sudden, I flew off. I landed in the garden, which was soft dirt, and I did not get hurt. So, and I had to ride my bike. We rode our bikes in the woods, and I had to ride my bike up this steep hill every day, or else my legs would be twitchy at night. And so that's the kind of little girl I was. I always had, as far as good grades. And in the youth group, one time I was given the lesson, And I had forgotten that I was supposed to do the lesson. And I went off in the choir room and I said, "Oh, dear Lord, I forgot I was supposed to do this. Please give me something to say that they can gain from it." And he did. It was on prayer. And when it was over, they said, "Laura Faith, you should be a minister." And I thought, no, that wasn't me. That was the Lord speaking through me. At any rate, that was another experience when I was an early teen. And really, it was a confirmation time when I first understood. My grandmother and my mother had both taught Sunday school. So I knew about things, but it didn't become real to me until my confirmation age. Then growing up, I found, I'm going on a digression.
That's okay. Let's talk a little bit more about Grandma. You know, what was your experience with her growing up? What did she give to you? What was your experience with that relationship?
She was a wonderful mother. She had us working. We worked with her in the garden. We worked with her in the kitchen. We were always helpmates, though. She told us, what we needed to do. And I did it and enjoyed it, but I never really learned to cook much until after I grew up, because she always told us, and I did it, but I never got the whole picture. And my one sister, when I went to bake, she kept saying, "Did you do this? Did you do that?" So I didn't want to do that at all with her. At any rate.
How was it different? Was it the same working with Grandpa, or did you learn things from working with him more, or what happened? What was different?
I learned from each of them. They were both amazing parents in their own right, supportive, gentle, encouraging, guiding in my development, both outside and physical things with my dad, and inside with house and garden and flowers and family things. We had a very rich family growing up, with our extended family also. And then I went off to college and graduate school.
And how did that transition? How did you come to choose from college? I know you got recruited a little bit with the Air Force, correct? How did that all happen?
Well, in the first place, in high school, they wanted me to go into social work for my aptitude test. And I said, that's a lot of history. I got A's and everything. I was the top of my class always. But I wasn't fascinated by history, and I was fascinated by science. So she came up with the idea of being a physical therapist. So I went to school, became to school and graduate school, never really knowing for sure how I would be with patients, but I knew I was fascinated by what I was learning. So the Air Force, whenever I was top grades and all, and my father was a top executive in Westinghouse, but he was saving his money and he wore his suits thin on the ankle, on that knee where he crossed his leg. And I thought, gee, I have top grades. I ought to get a scholarship. So I was thinking about applying for scholarships, and the Air Force came and they were recruiting. I was going to the best graduate school in the country at that time, D.T. Watson School of Physiatrics. And there were 13 of us that applied to the Air Force for this scholarship. They were giving 5 out of 3,000. As time came, all of my friends, the other 12, got letters that they were not selected. And I got a letter that I was selected, and I thought, oh my goodness, do I want this or not? My father, we never worked anywhere except at home in the garden and orchard and all. I wanted to work in a pharmacy, and my father said it would cost more to transport me there and back because we lived in the country than I would make. And the only place you could work was a little ice cream place, Car Hop. And he said, I'm not having people looking at my girls. So we didn't work anywhere. But then when the scholarship came through to me, I thought, oh, do I want this or don't I? All the things they promised were amazing and very good, but are they true? I started checking with my friends who were in the Air Force. Things sounded pretty good, but I said to my dad, I said, what do you think? And he said, Laura Faith, you are who you are. He had confidence and trust in me. And I had always, well, this is different too. I had always said I would be a virgin when I got married. Anyway, I accepted it, went in the Air Force, and had an excellent experience there. Just amazing. I treated everything in the first year from 5.5 hours old to 95 years old. It was a wonderful experience. And I told you about the one patient that I had early on with my miracle.
Yeah. Spinal injury. Yes. Yes.
It was an excellent experience. My Colonel Madgett was a wonderful mentor. She left me in charge of the clinic when she went on vacation. And I felt that I was getting such an excellent experience and wonderful people to work with. I would not want to think of getting out of the Air Force. I was in 6 years now by choice. I owed them 2. And that I wanted to have a baby. So that's why I got out of the Air Force, so that I could have Shawn. And I also, besides saying I wanted to be a virgin, I also there was a fellow that came into my life through the interns, and he had been divorced and had 2 children. And people said, oh, he's wonderful. He loves you. He thinks so highly of you, you know. I said, oh, he's just a wonderful friend. I could never marry him. He's been married, divorced, and has 2 children. I want a fresh one to experience everything anew. Well, I belonged with him. One day, walking down the hall in the clinic, I had been called to the phone to talk to a doctor, and I did, and I was going back to the gym. And all of a sudden, the Lord said, Joe is your one man. I always said I was a one-man woman. And I thought, oh. And my also sister, when I had been back home, and I talked about another fellow who wanted me to consider in a year when he came back from pilot training, I would be interested in him. And I had said no, I didn't want to write any letters, you know. How could I know if I cared about him then when I hardly knew him now? Anyway, my sister said, how could you think you might be interested in Jerry when all you talk about is Joe? Joe said this, Joe said that. Joe thinks this. He was an unusual person, and we were kind of kindred spirits. That's how we had come to be such close friends. But we did not date thinking ever. I water skied with him. He had a boat, and I water skied with him in a group, you know, but just us, no. And he had 2 children, and he wanted me to. One day he called and said, would I like to go to the zoo in Sacramento And I said, gee, I haven't gone to a zoo for a long time. So I said, okay, Sunday afternoon. Well, he came and got me, picked me up, but he didn't go toward the zoo. I said, you missed your turn. He said, I have to go home and get a jacket. So he went back to his apartment and he said, aren't you going to come in? I said, I don't go into men's apartments. And he went in and came out with the 2 children. And they were darling, but I had said no. I did not want to meet his children because they could not be, I didn't want to get attached. They couldn't be special to me, you know. But he had gone ahead and had me meet them anyway. And we, on the way to the zoo, I wouldn't speak to him and I'm looking out the window. Well, he was whistling and humming, and the children were happy because their father was happy. And they didn't notice that I would talk to them whenever they said, ask me anything. But other than that, I'm looking out the window. But I got to know them that day and they were darling and I enjoyed them. So that was another aspect of me getting drawn more to him. He called every night after I got off work. And just as a friend. And I might go to happy hour then or go out on a date. And that was fine. He was older than me, obviously, 7 years older. And I knew he cared about me a lot, but I tried not to encourage him too much. However, he kind of was of the attitude of, that's okay. One of these days you'll realize that you love me. And I thought that made me stubborn not to get drawn in if he was thinking that way. But he had a boat and he sanded it, refinished it, a Chris-Craft, inboard-outboard Chris-Craft. While we were not seeing each other, I was dating other people and he was biding his time fixing the boat. And when it came time to christen the boat, he asked if I wanted to go along and christen it. And I thought, sure. So I went with others to christen the boat, and he christened it Spunky, which is what he had said he thought about me when he first met me. The first day I had gone water skiing with a group, him and a group. And I was a novice and I fell off and I tumbled it was in the slough that was a holiday. It wasn't a whole day of skiing. I tumbled in it. And when I came up, I was standing there and they were all pointing at me and laughing. And I was just waiting for him to bring the rope around. Well, the reason they were laughing is I had mud all over my face. I had wiped my eyes and nose and not realized there was mud on my face. But that's why he called me Spunky, because I got up and skied more and did fine. So anyway, I ended up telling him about the Lord telling me that Joe was my man. And so then we came back and he asked my father's hand. My father, he had written letters to my father and mother, which were very impressive because so when they met him, they already knew some about him besides what they'd heard from my sisters and me. And so he and my father really hit it off. And we married and had a wonderful marriage. His children were like 6 and 7 years older than Shawn. And they grew up with me bathing them. And at any rate, when their father was killed, they were 9 and 10. And they were a big part of my life, and they were ours. However, after a year later, after their dad was killed, their mother said that she wanted the children back. She was planning to get married and was going to move to Oklahoma. And her new husband thought it was terrible she was letting someone else raise her children. So she wanted the children back. So I thought, a year after I lost my husband, I lost my two first children. At any rate, trusted the Lord, and he provided. He said, told me inside me that he would provide for them whatever their needs were, since I wouldn't be there to minister their cuts and bruises and needed clothes when their mother hadn't never done it. Anyway, a year later, she brought them back to California and said I could have them every weekend, every school holiday, all summer. I just couldn't have them to be mine. So I would drive and get them every weekend.
His mother-in-law saw your name.
For the summer, etc.
Okay.
But then I had said I was never going to marry again. I had 3 children and a mother-in-law who was my soulmate. Really. And who would want to marry someone who had 3 children and a mother-in-law? Well, I happened to be back in Pennsylvania when Jim's wife died. I went to the funeral home and I saw him up there with people all around, and I just reached out in spirit and signed the book and slipped out. Well, his mother-in-law saw my name, and she knew church secretary in my town. He saw my name, and she told Jim about me, and he wrote me a letter. But the letter he wrote me came, I had gone to a sermon on Sunday with a group that was, there's one room you don't let the Lord control in your life. And I thought, no, Lord, you've taught me. He was wiser than me. I didn't want to marry someone who'd been married before and had children. He put me there, and that's where I belonged. And so then the minister said, there's one closet you don't let the Lord control. And I said, Lord, you've got all of me. And then he said, there's one drawer. And I thought, eligible men. I didn't want anything to do with eligible men. I didn't ever want to marry again. I thought, chances of 2 times? Who's kidding who? 2 days later, that was Sunday, Saturday, Tuesday, I got a letter from Jim, which was just a friendly letter. But I thought, Lord, you know I don't want to get married again, and I don't want to. I had a wonderful church home and friends and my professional friends. At any rate, Jim wrote me 6 times, and I happened to mention it to my minister once. My mother-in-law babysat for his kids, and he said, Laura Faith, you go home and write that man a letter. I said, I can't. I have to do evangelism homework for tonight. He was making me take evangelism classes because I was prejudiced against evangelism. And he said, how can you be an educated woman and be so closed off to evangelism? You come to my class, and then if you feel that way, fine. He said, you forget about the homework tonight. You go home and write that man a letter. Well, you don't tell Laura Faith what to do. I did not go home and write him the letter. The next time I was coming home on the plane, there was a postcard from the airline postcard, which I never saw before or after. So I took the postcard and I wrote it to Jim because I had a next younger sister who had had a short, violent marriage. And she had little blonde hair, blue-eyed girl, and he had a little blonde hair, blue-eyed boy. I thought they would be perfect together. But whenever I got them together, she said, I don't see anything so special about him. And he said, how do you do to her? And yata to me, because we'd had common values and interests. We had been in college together. We were in Tri Beta together. We had never dated. One big reason was because my roommate was gaga over him. So I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't go out with him. But I knew him. I knew what kind of person he was. I knew he'd be a good husband and father for her. So we went to the escapades. I have to back up to where in Tri Beta, we had gone on summer trips, like to Florida. We were down in Key Largo. We camped. 21 of us went, 3 professors. And we camped all the way down, stopping at different universities and camping in a park near and seeing what biological things were special in that area. So we had been on this trip together. And I did not want to get to know him better because of my roommate. The fellow I was riding in his car and my best girlfriend and her mother went along as a chaperone. So the 4 of us were in the car, and Jim was coming and getting in the car every now and again to spell our friend that was the driver. So again, I got to know him more. Well, the last night of the trip on a lake on a little dock, we were talking and walking, and he kissed me. And he said, how can you kiss more than one boy like that? And I had been in the afterglow of a really nice kiss, and I thought, I don't kiss boys freely. I don't kiss everyone I go out with. I was offended that he said that. So that was a background to him writing to me later. So he also asked me to go to his formal, and I couldn't. I didn't know. He thought I wanted to go with someone else. But when we walked into the dorm, my roommate saw him, and she lit up like a Christmas tree. So I could not go to the formal with him. So that was the history of Jim and me in college. Then we went to the escapades, and when we got back, he kissed me. And he said, I don't know if I'm out of practice or if it's the way you kiss, but you didn't turn me on. And I thought, I froze. Oh my goodness. And he said, wait a minute. I can tell. What I mean is I'm so aware of kissing a person, not a female body, that did not set well with me, to see him again. And he asked me to go camping the next weekend with our kids. And I went in. I said, I don't think so. I went in the house, and my aunt was there and my mother and all. And he said, you said to the Lord you would be more open to his guidance. I said, no, I don't want to go camping with him. So I went to Ohio to visit other relatives that week, and my aunt down there said to me, you got to go back and go camping with him. And I said, no, I'm not. But on Friday, I went back home, and when I pulled in the driveway at home, Jim was right behind me. He was all packed and ready to go camping up to Sugar Lake, where we live now. And my mother said, repack your bags and you go camping with him. She said, you promised the Lord that you would be more open. And he said, I won't bother you. I said, I wasn't worried about him bothering me. I had been in the Air Force. I knew how to deal with men, But at any rate, I ended up going camping with him. And the other two children weren't with me that time because their mother wanted them for something. And so Shawn, who had been 7 months when Joe was killed, was a year and a month younger than his son, who was blonde hair, blue eyed. And my son, Shawn, was dark hair, dark eyes, and a year younger. And they were, 3 and 4, running around. They were darling. Anyway, on the way home, Jim said to me later, I thought there wasn't a chance with you because all you did was talk about Joe. Well, I did talk about Joe because I'd seen people who had previous marriages and weren't even allowed to keep contact with children they had raised. Adopted children, but still they had raised them. I thought that was terrible. So if you're interested in me at all, you've got all of me, Joe's part of my life now. It's part of who I am. So anyway, long story short, Jim asked me to go look at land that he was considering buying. And on the way home, he parked the car, and I never parked with any guy. Anyway, he stopped the car near home. And he asked if Shawn and I would marry him and Stephen. And I said, it's not just Shawn and me. I said, there's Jim and Renee and Mom, besides Shawn and me. I said, well, I would be honored to help raise those kids. So we both came to a feeling like we felt like we were both each being led to join forces to raise these kids. I lived in California. He lived here. So we really never had a chance. I went home. I was only back here a week. I went home and, it had to be 2 weeks. Anyway, I went home. And he asked if I would consider marrying him. And I said, you have to come meet my other children and Mom before we can even think of. He came out at Christmas time. And we ended up getting married. That was 51 years ago. And it's amazing. We have had a wonderful marriage. We also had a daughter then. The 5 children all turned out to be super fine kids and have done well in their lives. So that part of my life has just been amazingly good. 2 times I married a man who'd been married before and had children when I said I wanted a fresh one. But the Lord is wiser than we are. So that's how I ended up here. With Shawn as my son, and up here at the lake where we had camped, he worked on a neighboring farm. We ended up against all understanding, we ended up with an old farm up here. Old overgrown farm because an old maid had lived in it for years. But Jim had always wanted a little piece of Sugar Lake since he was 8 years old. We ended up with a farm. So Shawn and Stephen would go up and work on it. And one time he was throwing bales of hay, and he was 11 or 12 at most, and he was always a lanky boy, but very muscular, but lanky. And I thought, how in the world can you throw a bale of hay when I don't think I could throw a bale of hay? And at any rate, so Shawn had part of that growing up. And Joe had always, when he was home, had earphones on Shawn. He would be playing music, because he recorded music for a local restaurant, nice restaurant. And he would have Shawn listening to the music while he was listening to it. So even though Shawn was a day shy of 7 months when Joe was killed, he was very aware of his father. And after he was killed, Joe flew in the Air Force, and he would be gone like 5 days a month. Well, Shawn didn't seem to pay any attention with all the people in and out of the house. When he died, he'd be playing in the playpen, but whenever anyone came in the door, he would perk up and look to see if it was his dad. After the 5 days, before that, he didn't pay any attention. So at that age, he was still very aware of his father and somehow aware of the 5 days that he would be gone and then come back. So he was looking for him to come back, but he didn't. At any rate, Shawn and my father had a very close relationship too, which was very good. And in high school, Shawn got involved in the band, in the jazz band. He played jazz saxophone. Tying in, I think, with the music that his father had him listen to when he was a baby. I also had been in a band with clarinet, but the influence that Shawn had would have been from listening to the music with his dad. And he could play the sax with the radio, something playing there, and he could play along with whatever it was. So that was one of the things that he got that he has gotten away from in his adult life because he's been so involved in helping others. And I couldn't believe how wonderful it was to have, I would say to the Lord in the morning, thank you for giving me a job where I can help others, and I love it, and get paid for it as a physical therapist. So I've got a couple of stories, but there are lots more. At any rate, sorry to go on and on.
No, it's good. It's good. Maybe we could talk about a little bit about how about Grandpa Ramage and about Grandma Ramage and about those kind of things. So about Grandpa, who he was and how he influenced you a little bit more, and then Grandma a little bit more.
They were a very strong influence to me in my life. I gave you hints about before. They influenced me on everything. And like I say, my father got where he knew me in and out. So when the Air Force scholarship, 5 out of 3,000 came, he was okay with his girl that couldn't go to be a
ice cream girl.
couldn't be a car op, that she could go to the Air Force.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful experience. I really never had, I was a captain. I have to say, I never had anyone approach me or look at me crooked. Everyone always respected me. So it was a very good experience in every aspect.
Is that an issue with you, marrying my dad when he was, you outranked him in a sense, right? How did that come about?
So he was a master sergeant. He got chief master sergeant right before he was killed. Did you ask me how he influenced me?
I mean, I'm just saying, was that an issue when you were getting to get married, when you outranked him, I should say? Right.
You weren't supposed to date enlisted people. And I didn't. I didn't have any opportunity to accept him. And whenever I was planning to marry him, my the full bird colonel that was osteopath in charge over physical therapy, he was having a retirement party and invited me. And I said, my husband is enlisted. He said, Laura Faith, how can you even ask that? He said, if you married him, then he's very, very welcome, at my retirement dinner. And he was. So it really never became an issue since we worked and lived in different worlds in the Air Force. I was in the hospital and he was on flight crew, flying all the time. Not all the time, but since he had worked in the simulator, which is where you're training the other flight engineers. And so he had worked himself up. He was involved in writing the manual. His aircraft was one that a number had gone down and they couldn't figure why. And it was a C-133. And the one that went down over, his best friend was on, and the plane went down and they were in the ocean. And when he was recovered, he was bent. The plane had gone down and he was a flight engineer and went back to try to fix whatever was wrong, that it was going down. And when it hit, the seats that were in there came back and went over him. No, he was in a seat and the engine block, came back that was cargo and bent him backwards. So he ended up being my patient in the hospital. At any rate, Joe was sent over there to troubleshoot what happened. And that's when they discovered that the plane would stall out when the props were at a certain pitch and the plane speed was at a certain pitch. And then it would stall out. And that's why these planes were going down. So he was involved in writing the manual of what to do when that happened, to keep it from happening again. But then came the time when he was going on a flight. He was coming back to Pennsylvania with a big Huey to be repaired. So he was going to go golfing with my dad. When they flew over Denver, the wings iced. So they climbed to get away from the icing. And when they did, the pressure differential from in the cabin and outside became greater, and the plane peeled like an orange. It had been x-rayed the month before, but there was apparently a foot-long crack in the fuselage at this time. It peeled like an orange. And the plane split in two, and the back part of it went down in flames. The cabin, when it went down with them in it, it didn't burn until it hit the ground. But it burned then, and they were all burned. So they had no skin, no wedding ring. The control panel was molten metal. So that's how he was killed. It exploded over Nebraska. And when they came that night, I always liked everything neat when I went to bed. I had the children all in bed, and I was writing a letter to my sister whose birthday was coming. And this night, all of a sudden, I got up, left everything on the table, all the writing materials that I had out there, went upstairs and went to bed without brushing my teeth, showering. I always showered, washed my face, brushed my teeth. I went to bed without doing that. And at 4:30 in the morning, there was a knock on the door and 6 men in uniform. And I said, Joe, and they said, yes. And I said, Dad, and they said, yes. They said the plane went down. I said, is there any chance he might have survived? And they said, no. And I thought that I would explode to smithereens from the depths of my being at that instant when I was washed over with the amazing, enveloping love and peace and joy that I'd had a chance to share a slice of life with Joe. And the Lord, it's like he spoke to me at that point and said, Joe's with me now, everything will be all right. So I don't know what the other men, his best friend was in front. I don't know what they all thought when I didn't scream and cry or anything. Here I am in a loving, peaceful experience, at any rate. I was worried about telling his mother because she had lived with us until a month before. She'd gotten her own apartment then, and I had to go and tell her that he was killed. And she had worked the night shift. She was a nurse. She worked the night shift at a nursing home there. And I didn't know if she would have a heart attack or not. But anyway, the Lord took care of it all. My parents were out there in less than 24 hours. Everything fell into place. My little boy wasn't even worried because his father was gone. He'd be back in 5 days. My father and mother, as far as teaching me, I can't think of specifics. It's just that they set such an example and were so supporting and loving always and guiding us in everything. I can't imagine life without that kind of love and support. And I really feel for the people that do not have that. And I tried to provide it then for my children. And Jim and I did.
Oh, you did a great job.
So, and Shawn went to college and was doing very well. And he had a girlfriend that was, her dad was a chiropractor, and she was going to be a chiropractor. And the father had talked to him about applied kinesiology, and Shawn thought he'd like to go into applied kinesiology. And at that time, there was only one school that had it, which was in Whittier, California, LA area. So he had to go to California to go to graduate school to become a chiropractor. And I have to say, as a chiropractor, I've had them since I was 10 because of allergies. I never had anyone with hands so gentle, firm, precise as my son's. So I felt badly in a way when he got away from doing hands-on chiropractic work full-time because he was busy teaching light ultrasound, musculoskeletal ultrasound diagnostics, and then the stem cells, and then stellate ganglion blocks, really complicated things that he, spider dissecting, that he became very good at doing and teaching. So people to send, he was on the faculty for teaching, and he was on the pioneering, Shawn?
The Pioneer, licensed Pioneer. I was the first to be licensed as RMSK, first group, I would say. Yeah, the Pioneer group to be licensed.
He'd been on the faculty for teaching, and so he had taught people all over the world. And the people all over the world that he had taught, as time went on, when they had cases that they weren't sure that they were good enough to do it, they sent them to him, and they still do, from all over. So he has referrals that come from, one, I'm not allowed to talk about that, but one was a football player, and he came to Shawn for treatment, and his doctor and trainer came along to see how Shawn did it. So, two of them, the one had come, and when he came back a second time, the second player came along with, and the doctor and trainer came to, what was Shawn doing that was so successful?
Just doing my best. That's all. Yeah.
Right. And taking care of making people better, like I had the pleasure of doing on a much lower level.
I don't think any lower level. It's just helping people is helping people. There's no one way better than another. I think you did.
What a joy in life.
Yeah.
At any rate, I don't even like to just say proud. I am excessively proud of my son.
I'm excessively proud of my mom, so it was just good to be here. All right.
Anything else?
Oh, there's so much to do, but I think we did a lot for one day. We'll have to do another day. But I love you. Thank you so much for spending your time with me here.
Love you too. You take care and enjoy your life. That's the big thing. Yeah. Enjoy what you're doing. Revel in your capabilities. And I pray, my wife just had surgery. I pray she gets better.
Yeah.
She's your helpmate.
Yes.
As a doctor also.
Yeah.
I love you.
Love you too. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye for now.